The conference room at Harrison and Reed Law Firm sat on the fourth floor of a historic brick building in downtown Seattle. I arrived 15 minutes early, just like I always did. The receptionist offered a polite smile and pointed me toward conference room C as I walked down the quiet hallway. I could already see my family gathered behind the glass walls. My parents, Michael and Karen Chen, my older sister Vanessa, my younger brother Ethan, Uncle Raymond, and Aunt Grace were all sitting together, laughing as if they were attending a family reunion instead of a will reading. The moment I opened the door, the laughter stopped. Vanessa looked up, clearly surprised. "Wow, you actually showed up." I calmly pulled out a chair at the far end of the table. "Grandma passed away. Why wouldn't I be here?" Ethan scoffed. "I'm surprised you even knew. You never came around." I stayed silent. There was no reason to tell them that I had spoken with Grandma every single day for the last 3 years. They didn't know about our long video calls, the stories she shared, the language lessons she gave me, or the countless evenings we spent talking about life. They wouldn't have believed me anyway. My father shifted uncomfortably. "We weren't even sure you'd get the message. You've been so busy living in Denver." "I got the message," I replied. What I didn't say was that I had been the first person called when Grandma's condition worsened. I had stayed on the phone with her during her final hours, listening to every breath, telling her how much I loved her while the rest of the family argued over funeral plans. Vanessa sat across from me dressed in expensive black designer clothing, looking more prepared for a magazine photo shoot than a family gathering. She glanced at her watch impatiently. "Can we just get started? Some of us have important things to do." At that moment, the door opened and an older attorney entered carrying a leather briefcase. "Good afternoon. I'm Richard Harrison and I'll be handling Mrs. Evelyn Chen's final will today." He sat down and opened a thick folder. Instantly, everyone leaned forward with interest. I remained quiet and watched. Before beginning, he carefully checked everyone's identification. When he reached me, he paused and smiled slightly. "Miss Lauren Chen. Your grandmother talked about you often." "She did?" I asked softly. "More than you can imagine," he replied, and something in his voice immediately caught Vanessa's attention. The attorney returned to his seat and opened the will. "Before we begin, I should mention that Mrs. Chen was extremely clear about her wishes. She revised this document several times over the last 5 years. In fact, the most recent update was made just 8 months ago." The room suddenly became very quiet. My mother frowned immediately. She was already very sick by then. Attorney Harrison nodded calmly. "She was ill, yes, but she was fully competent. I have signed medical evaluations from 2 independent doctors confirming that." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Can we skip all this and get to the important part? Who gets what?" The attorney gave her a cold look before continuing. "Mrs. Chen's estate is centered around 9 rental properties throughout the Seattle metropolitan area. Their combined value is estimated at roughly $4.5 million. The room instantly fell silent. I already knew about the properties because Grandma had told me their stories over the years. She and Grandpa had arrived in America with almost nothing and spent decades working endless hours to buy their first duplex. From there, they slowly built everything they owned. My father looked stunned. "I only knew about 6 properties." "Your mother was a remarkable businesswoman," Mr. Harrison replied. "Several of the properties were purchased within the last decade. All are occupied, profitable, and professionally managed." Vanessa's eyes lit up. "So we split them equally. 3 for me, 3 for Ethan, and 3 for Lauren." "That's not how Mrs. Chen arranged it," the attorney said. Vanessa straightened in her chair. "What do you mean?" Mr. Harrison opened another document. "Before discussing the inheritance, your grandmother instructed me to read a personal letter." Ethan sighed loudly. "Just tell us who gets the money." "The letter is legally part of her final wishes," the attorney replied firmly. He unfolded the paper and began reading. "My dear family, if this letter is being read, then my journey has ended. I hope you remembered me with kindness. These 9 properties represent 50 years of hard work, sacrifice, and determination. Your grandfather and I built them one step at a time while learning a new country and a new language. During the last 5 years of my life, I paid close attention to each of you. I watched how you treated me and what truly mattered to you. Vanessa, you visited me only twice in 3 years. Both visits focused on my properties and what would happen to them after I was gone. You never asked how I was doing. Ethan, you called occasionally, usually offering to help manage my assets. You were interested in the buildings, but not in my life. Michael and Karen, I love you both, but somewhere along the way your children learned to see me as an inheritance instead of a grandmother. Every conversation became about what I owned rather than who I was. Then there is Lauren. Lauren, who moved away years ago and whom everyone claimed had abandoned the family. Lauren, who stopped attending family gatherings because she was constantly made to feel unwelcome. Yet Lauren called me every day. She listened to my stories, learned Mandarin so we could speak in my native language when I felt tired, shared her life with me, and cared about me as a person. She loved me, not my money. The room grew tense as the attorney continued. Because of that, I made a decision. In 2020, I transferred all 9 properties into an irrevocable trust. The sole beneficiary of that trust is Lauren Murray Chen. To Vanessa and Ethan, I leave my jewelry, artwork, and personal belongings, valued at approximately $30,000. To my son Michael and his wife Karen, I leave my love and my blessing. To Lauren, I leave everything else, the properties, the income, and the future they create. This is not punishment. It is simply the result of choices made over many years. In life, people harvest what they plant, and I watched carefully to see what each of you planted. With love, Grandma. The silence that followed felt endless. Every face in the room had turned toward me, my pulse hammered in my ears. Then Vanessa suddenly slammed both hands onto the table. "This is ridiculous," she shouted. She wasn't thinking clearly. There's no way this is legal. Her face burned with anger as she pointed directly at me, her hand shaking. "You manipulated her," Vanessa snapped, pointing at me. "You turned Grandma against the rest of us." Attorney Harrison remained calm. "Miss Chen, your grandmother completed these transfers after being evaluated by 2 independent physicians. Both confirmed she was fully competent. The trust is legal, binding, and cannot be reversed." Ethan stared at the documents spread across the table. 9 properties. Every single one goes to Lauren. "Correct," Harrison replied as he opened another folder. "These records were filed with the county in 2020. Ownership of all 9 properties was transferred into the Lauren M. Chen Irrevocable Trust. One by one, he placed the documents on the table. Every deed, every signature, every notarized transfer was there. The properties included apartment buildings, duplexes, rental homes, and commercial spaces spread across the Seattle area. Everything now belonged to me. My mother sat silently wiping tears from her face while my father looked completely defeated. Uncle Raymond and Aunt Grace seemed too shocked to speak. Vanessa, however, was furious. "This is exactly what you wanted," she hissed. "You walked away from the family and somehow convinced Grandma that we were the bad guys." I finally met her glare. "I didn't walk away from anyone." "Yes, you did," Vanessa shouted. "You moved away and stopped showing up to family gatherings." "I stopped showing up because every visit turned into criticism," I replied calmly. "You mocked my choices. Ethan constantly found reasons to put me down, and none of you ever accepted me for who I was." "That's not true," my mother said quietly. "Really?" I asked. "When was the last time anyone asked about my life without comparing me to Vanessa or telling me what I should be doing instead?" No one answered. I took out my phone and unlocked it. "For the last 3 years, Grandma and I talked every morning before work." I turned the screen toward them. 1,095 consecutive video calls. The call history filled the screen, showing hours and hours of conversations. The room fell silent. Vanessa stared at the evidence. "You could have faked that." "Why would I?" I asked. "The real question is why none of you called her." Vanessa's face reddened with embarrassment and anger. "I was busy." "So was I replied. "The difference is that I made time for someone I loved." Before anyone could respond, Attorney Harrison cleared his throat. "There is another matter Mrs. Chen wanted addressed." He pulled out a final folder. Before her passing, she requested a financial review of the properties. My father's expression immediately changed. "Why?" he asked nervously. Harrison opened the report. "The 9 properties generate roughly $180,000 in annual rental income. However, Mrs. Chen was only receiving about $100,000 per year." The room instantly became tense. "What are you saying?" Uncle Raymond asked. Harrison looked directly at Vanessa and Ethan. "Over the past 5 years, approximately $400,000 appears to be missing." My stomach tightened. "Missing where?" I asked. "The properties were managed by family members," Harrison replied. "Vanessa oversaw several properties, Ethan managed others, and some were handled by your parents. According to the management agreements, they were entitled to a 10% management fee." Instead, financial records indicate that nearly 45% of rental income was being withheld. My father's face turned pale. Vanessa shot out of her chair. "That's not true." Ethan looked equally shaken. But the attorney calmly pushed the audit report across the table, and the detailed numbers told a very different story. "We never stole anything," Ethan argued, but Attorney Harrison calmly cut him off. "I have the bank records." Rental payments were deposited into personal accounts, cash income went unreported, and tenants were paying far more than what was being reported to Mrs. Chen. Every transaction is documented. The realization hit me hard. "You were taking money from Grandma for 5 years while she trusted you." "We earned it," Ethan shot back. "We handled repairs, tenants, and problems." "You earned the 10% management fee she agreed to," I replied. "Not nearly half the income. That's theft." Vanessa suddenly stood up. "This is ridiculous. We're leaving. We'll challenge this in court." "Sit down," Harrison said firmly. His voice was calm, but nobody missed the authority behind it. Vanessa reluctantly sat back down. Harrison opened another file. "There's something else. Mrs. Chen discovered the missing money nearly 2 years ago. After that, she hired a private investigator." My mother's eyes widened. "She did what?" "She had financial records reviewed, spending habits analyzed, and bank deposits traced." He opened the report. "Vanessa, you purchased a luxury SUV with cash in 2022. The amount was nearly $50,000. Can you explain where that money came from?" Vanessa remained silent. Harrison turned another page. "Ethan, your vacations, casino expenses, and luxury purchases totaled tens of thousands of dollars despite your reported income." Ethan stared down at the table. Then Harrison looked toward my parents. "Michael and Karen, your extensive home renovation cost over $70,000, yet your financial records show no savings capable of covering that expense. What they do show are deposits matching the missing rental income." My mother broke down completely. My father looked as though the air had been knocked out of him. Suddenly everything made sense. "Grandma knew," I whispered. "She knew exactly what was happening." "Yes," Harrison replied. "And she left very specific instructions. If the family accepted her wishes peacefully, this information would remain private. However, if anyone challenged the trust or accused Lauren of wrongdoing, I was instructed to provide all evidence to law enforcement and recommend criminal charges." The room became silent. Vanessa's confidence disappeared instantly. "So this is blackmail?" she asked. "No," I answered. "This is Grandma making sure the truth came out." Harrison nodded. Mrs. Chen believed everyone had a choice: respect her decision or face the consequences of their actions. Ethan shook his head. "This isn't fair." For the first time, my anger surfaced. "Fair? You stole from an elderly woman who trusted you. You ignored her unless money was involved, and now you're talking about fairness?" My mother looked at me through tears. "Lauren, we're still family. Please don't let this destroy us." I slowly stood from my chair. "I'm not the one who destroyed this family. That happened years ago when you made it clear I would never be good enough." She tried to speak, but I continued. "Every criticism, every comparison, every time you treated my choices like mistakes, you meant those things. That's why I left." I turned toward Harrison. "What do I need to sign?" He handed me several documents transferring control of the trust assets. I signed each page without hesitation. Across the table, Vanessa watched me with pure resentment. "You're really taking everything." "You're still receiving Grandma's personal belongings," I replied. "That's more support than I received from this family for most of the last 7 years." "How can you be so cold?" she demanded. I looked directly at her. "I learned from people who treated relationships like business transactions." Gathering my paperwork, I headed toward the door. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Please send any remaining documents to my Denver address." "Of course," he replied. As I reached the exit, my father called after me. "Lauren, wait, can we talk?" I stopped but didn't turn around. "About what, Dad? About the money Grandma lost, or about all the years you watched me be pushed aside and never said a word? About all the times you stood by and watched while they tore me apart?" I asked. My father's face fell. "Lauren, we love you." I slowly shook my head. "No. You loved the version of me that stayed quiet, obeyed every expectation, and never questioned anything. You loved the daughter you wanted me to be, not the person I actually am." Without waiting for a response, I walked out of the conference room. Behind me, I heard Vanessa shouting, my mother crying, and chairs scraping across the floor, but I never looked back. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of legal documents, property meetings, and endless voicemails from family members. Then Vanessa ignored the warning and officially challenged the trust in court. The case lasted less than 2 weeks before being dismissed. Grandma's records were simply too detailed. Her mental competency had been thoroughly documented, and every transfer was legally airtight. Shortly after the case ended, Attorney Harrison called me. "Lauren, because your sister contested the trust, your grandmother's final instructions must now be carried out. The financial evidence has to be turned over to the district attorney." I sat silently in my apartment overlooking the rainy Seattle skyline, thinking about Grandma. "Do you have a choice?" I asked. "No," he replied. "These were her exact instructions." I closed my eyes for a moment. "Then do it." The investigation moved quickly. The financial trail was impossible to hide. Within weeks, Vanessa, Ethan, and my parents were facing criminal charges related to the missing rental income. Panic spread through the family. Vanessa left emotional voicemails begging for help. I listened once and deleted them. Ethan sent emails ranging from angry accusations to desperate apologies. I blocked every message. Then one evening there was a knock on my apartment door. When I opened it, my parents were standing there. They looked exhausted, older than I remembered. My mother's eyes were swollen from crying, and my father's hands trembled as he held his coat. "Can we come in?" he asked quietly. Reluctantly, I stepped aside. We sat in silence for several moments before my mother finally spoke. "We're sorry for everything, for how we treated you, for what happened with Grandma, for all of it." I nodded. "Okay." Both of them looked surprised. "That's it?" my father asked. "What do you want me to say?" I replied. "That everything is forgiven, that we can erase years of damage." Tears rolled down my mother's face. "We just want our daughter back." I looked directly at her. "Which daughter? The real one or the version you spent years trying to create?" Neither of them answered. I leaned forward. "For most of my life, I tried to earn approval from this family. No matter what I did, it was never enough. There was always something wrong with my career, my choices, my friends, my life. Everything became a comparison." "We were trying to help," my father said. "No," I interrupted. "You were trying to control me. There's a difference." The room became quiet again. "When I finally moved away and built a life that made me happy, you treated me like I had betrayed the family. Grandma was the only person who truly saw me for who I was. She understood me, and in the end she protected me." My father suddenly stood up, his frustration finally breaking through. "So that's it. You're just going to let this happen? Let your brother and sister face criminal charges? Let this family fall apart?" "I didn't destroy this family," I said as I stood and faced my father. "You did that yourselves. You lied, you stole, and you betrayed someone who trusted you." My mother wiped away tears. "Please, Lauren, you could ask them to drop the charges. Tell them it was all a misunderstanding." I shook my head. "It wasn't a misunderstanding, it was theft." My father's voice rose. "Your grandmother had plenty of money." For the first time, I lost my composure. "It's not the point," I shouted. "The money was never the point. The problem is that all of you stopped seeing her as a person. You saw her as a source of money, just like you never really saw me for who I was. You only cared whether I fit your expectations." Tears ran down my face as years of hurt finally poured out. "You taught Vanessa and Ethan that love comes with conditions, that family is about control, and that people only matter when they're useful. Grandma was the only one willing to admit it." A few minutes later, they left. I watched their car disappear down the street and felt nothing except exhaustion. Life moved on. There were 9 properties to manage and countless responsibilities waiting for me. I met with the property management company Grandma had trusted for decades. The owner, Jennifer, had worked alongside her for over 20 years. As we toured the buildings, Jennifer smiled sadly. "Your grandmother was incredible. She knew every tenant by name. She remembered birthdays, checked on families, and even handled repairs herself long after most people her age would have retired." Hearing that made me realize how little I truly knew about the impact Grandma had made. Over the following weeks, I visited every property, met tenants, listened to their stories, and learned what each building needed. Slowly, I understood Grandma's real lesson. The properties were never about becoming rich. They were about helping people, creating stability, and leaving something meaningful behind. I kept Jennifer's company in charge of daily management, invested in repairs and improvements, and created a hardship fund for tenants facing financial struggles. After expenses, the properties generated over $100,000 a year. Since my software engineering career already provided a comfortable living, I used much of the income to honor Grandma's values. I created scholarships for first-generation Asian American students, donated to organizations helping immigrant families, and established housing assistance programs for seniors in need. Most importantly, I continued Grandma's tradition of personally checking on tenants every week, not because of money, but because of people. 9 months later, the embezzlement case finally reached court. Rather than risk a trial, Vanessa, Ethan, and my parents accepted plea agreements. They avoided prison but received felony convictions and were ordered to repay the money they had taken. Before sentencing, the prosecutor asked me to testify. I initially wanted nothing to do with it, but Attorney Harrison encouraged me. "Your grandmother didn't want revenge," he told me. "She wanted accountability and the truth." After thinking about her and everything she stood for, I agreed to take the stand, so I went to court. I sat quietly in the courtroom and watched my family stand before the judge. Vanessa looked angry and unrepentant, Ethan looked exhausted and defeated, and my parents seemed overwhelmed with shame. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the podium and took a deep breath. "Your Honor, these people are my family. I grew up loving them and part of me still does." The courtroom became silent. But they betrayed someone who loved them completely. My grandmother trusted them, supported them, and believed family meant loyalty. Instead, they took advantage of that trust while telling her they cared about her. That wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. I glanced toward my parents. My grandparents came to America with almost nothing. They worked for decades to build something meaningful. They wanted that legacy to be respected. Instead, it became something people felt entitled to. My mother tried to interrupt, but the judge quickly stopped her. I continued. "The hardest part isn't the money, it's the fact that my grandmother felt she needed to protect me from my own family. Think about what that says. Think about how much pain she must have seen before deciding to do that." I looked back at the judge. "I'm not here to ask for revenge. I just believe actions should have consequences. My grandmother believed that too." When I finished, I returned to my seat. After a long pause, the judge handed down sentences that were firm but fair. Outside the courtroom, my father approached me one last time. "Are you happy now?" he asked bitterly. "You destroyed this family." I shook my head. "No, Dad, you destroyed it yourselves. All I did was tell the truth." Vanessa walked past and glared at me. "I'll never forgive you." "I know," I replied calmly, "and I can live with that." For the first time in my life, their approval no longer mattered. A few weeks later, I stood outside the first duplex my grandparents had purchased decades earlier. The building looked beautiful, with fresh paint, healthy gardens, and happy tenants. Jennifer smiled as she looked around. "Your grandmother would be proud of what you've done." "I hope so," I said quietly. "Trust me," she replied. "She would be." My phone suddenly buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. The message was from Ethan. He wrote that he had started therapy and was trying to understand the choices he had made. He wasn't asking for forgiveness, only hoping that someday they might be able to talk again. I stared at the message for several moments before replying. "I'm glad you're getting help. I'm in therapy too. Maybe someday we can talk, but I'm not ready yet." After sending the message, I slipped my phone back into my pocket. "Good news?" Jennifer asked. I looked at the building, the tenants, and everything my grandmother had worked so hard to create. "Maybe," I said. "Not today, but maybe someday." That evening, back in my Seattle apartment, I sat at my desk with the journal my therapist had encouraged me to keep. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt before. Not anger, not sadness, not even relief. It was peace. Grandma's legacy wasn't the properties, the money, or the trust she left behind. Her real legacy was the lesson she taught me. That family isn't defined by blood, inheritance, or obligation. It's defined by love, respect, and the choices people make every day. And finally, I understood it. Dear Grandma, it's been 1 year since that day in the attorney's office, 1 year since everything changed. I'm taking care of the properties now, looking after the tenants, and trying to honor the life you and Grandpa built together. I finally understand why you made the choices you did. You weren't trying to punish anyone. You were simply telling the truth. Vanessa and Ethan are rebuilding their lives, and Mom and Dad have been trying to make things right, even though I'm not ready to fully let them back in yet. Maybe one day. But more than anything, I want to thank you. Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. Thank you for believing me when I started doubting myself. Thank you for showing me that my feelings mattered and that I deserved respect. What you left me was worth far more than buildings or money. You gave me confidence, self-respect, and the courage to set boundaries. You taught me that love is not control, and that real family is built on respect and understanding. I miss you every day, but I still feel close to you whenever I visit the properties, talk to the tenants, or see the lives that have been touched by your kindness. Thank you for loving me exactly as I was. Love, Lauren. I closed the journal and looked out across the Seattle skyline. Hundreds of miles away, the 9 buildings my grandparents had worked their entire lives to build were still standing strong, carrying forward a legacy that meant much more than money. Just then, my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number. After a moment, I answered. Hello, Lauren, it's Uncle Raymond. My body immediately tensed. Hi. He hesitated before speaking again. I know you probably don't want to hear from family, but Grace and I have spent a lot of time talking about everything that happened. We were wrong. We stayed silent when we should have spoken up. We watched you get pushed away and did nothing about it. I sat down slowly. Why are you telling me this now? Because somebody needed to say it, he replied. Because you deserved better, and because your grandmother was right. His words hit harder than I expected. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he continued. We'd like to see you sometime. No pressure, no expectations, just dinner and a chance to talk. I thought about everything that had happened over the past year. The pain, the lessons, the accountability, and the possibility that some people really could change. Maybe, I finally said. I need a little more time. That's fair, Uncle Raymond replied. Take all the time you need, we'll be here. After the call ended, I sat quietly in the darkness thinking about family, forgiveness, and the long road that exists between them. Grandma had taught me how to protect myself, but she had also shown me the value of giving people the chance to become better than they were yesterday. Maybe one day I would have that dinner. Maybe one day some of those broken relationships could be rebuilt. But for now, I had a responsibility to carry forward. I had tenants who depended on me, communities to support, and a legacy built through decades of sacrifice and love. And as I looked out over the city lights, I realized that was enough. More than enough.